Hey guys, it's Rachel. Today, I want to do a video that I've kind of had planned for a while. I want to do a couple different favorite books videos, and I'm not good at picking favorites. Like, there's so many books that I like for a lot of different reasons, so how I want to split this up is I want to do like favorite series versus favorite standalone. So today I want to focus on my favorite book series, and rather than like ranking them, I want to talk about my favorite book series over time. So what was like my first favorite book series that I remember having versus, what's a new favorite that I found today. And so I'm sure, I know it's like popular to kind of look back at what we read when we were teenagers, especially in that Twilight, post-Twilight time, and be like, oh, what were we thinking? I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna take a crap on my past self. I think that she was reading to have a lot of fun, and I look back at the stuff that teen me was reading, and I don't really think it's that bad. So I'm pretty unapologetic about my past interests in like the music I liked and the books I liked and the movies that I like, because I still really enjoy a lot of them today. So I'm not gonna like crap on myself. Obviously you're gonna see my taste kind of change over time, and it's very possible that if I reread some of these today that it wouldn't hit the same as it did when I was a kid, and that's I think to be expected, because like if you grow up and you revisit those things, you do change. But that doesn't mean that teenage you was dumb. It means that teenage you is different from adult you now, and that's okay. So first things first, I have to start off obviously with the earliest. And so the thing is, with the earliest one, first of all, everything that's ever been said about it has already, well, that didn't make any sense. Everything that anyone could ever say about it's basically already been said. There's that the author gets on everyone's nerves, and she gets on my nerves too. So I'm not going to talk about it a ton, but I am one of those millennials that grew up reading Harry Potter. This was the first book series that I really, really loved. And I still do really love the story. It's just so frustrating. It's sad that I feel like the authors kind of made it to the point where it just kind of dampened the memory a bit, which is sad, because I have a lot of really good memories reading these books and waiting for the next one to come out. This is the first book series where I read really chunky books as a kid. So obviously that's like really huge when you're a kid. That builds confidence and things like that. And I don't think people really talk about that when they talk about books that they read when they're young, at least not on BookTube. So that was really nice, and I just felt like I was plowing through pages. Like I felt like I really was hooked and just kind of ready to follow Harry into God knows what he would have to face. So I don't know, I loved these books a lot. I don't think I would necessarily be the reader that I am without that. So then, right when the Harry Potter craze kind of ended, so not ended, because you had the movies that were still coming out, and those were obviously a huge deal. But after the book came out, that's when, even though Twilight was published in 2005 and Deathly Hallows was published in 2007, it felt like once we could take a breath after the 7th Harry Potter book was published, we all, or at least all the girlies I knew, ate this up. And I have reread Twilight as an adult, and I stand by it. I don't think it's that bad. I think that it's fun. I've talked before in my unpopular book opinions video about some of my more in-depth feelings about Twilight and the criticisms of it. I just love it. I think it's so fun. I don't think it's half as bad as people say. This got me into, for the first time, I'd always had an interest in like things like witches, vampires, werewolves, stuff like that. And obviously this got me into that. This was the first time I really read a lot of like romance subplots. I actually didn't read this first though. There's a standalone book that got me into a paranormal romance, which will be on the standalones video whenever that comes out. But yeah, I will say teenage me really connected with Bella and how freaking clumsy she was and accident prone and dizzy all the time. Like honestly, no character that I've ever read before has gotten as dizzy as Bella Swan and I was dizzy all the time as a kid. I don't know why. I'm not really like that as much now, but I felt like when I was a teenager, I was always getting dizzy. When I was in school, there were a couple different people, like not even in the same friend group, that told me that I would have been a better Bella than Kristen Stewart. And yeah, part of that was just knocking on Kristen Stewart. I also don't have a problem with her per se. But I think that that kind of aloofness that Bella has that I think people find pretentious. I think a lot of teenage girls have that. A lot of us feel like no one's possibly looking at us, when that's not always true. And I think that we look at ourselves and kind of, you know, as like these average, boring people, but there's always going to be somebody that thinks you're interesting. It may not be a 104/7 whatever freaking year old vampire. Hopefully it's not, but somebody out there is going to think that you're special. And I think that that's a message that I don't think that everyone understands comes from Twilight. And I think that it can make it seem like, oh, but you need other people to affirm that you're special and blah, 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 blah. I know it helps to, I think everyone wants to feel loved though. And I think that that's part of the draw of Twilight. So then the next one, whew, people love to hate this book series, but I ate it up as a teenager. It was The House of Night Books by PC Cast and Kristen Cast. Woo! It's really long. I also talk about this in my unpopular book opinions video. And I kind of address some of the common criticisms there, so I'm not going to go into it. I loved, this was like a mixture of vampires and magic, which you're probably like, wow, Rachel, it just combines Twilight and Harry Potter. Yeah, that was kind of the essence. And so these vampires go to this like school, let's say are marked or, you know, chosen by the goddess as a vampire. And so this story, if you don't know it, because I didn't really summarize the other ones because like everyone knows those, but follows this girl named Zoe. She's been marked as a vampire. She has to go to the vampire school now, and it kind of seems like there's some weird stuff going down at the school. It ends up kind of growing and growing throughout the series. The high priestess at the school increasingly seems sketchy. You have this guy reincarnated, and I'm explaining this horribly. Basically, it's vampires that do Wicca circles to defeat evil. I liked it. It spoke to me as a child. I thought that the dialogue was really funny, even if it was kind of unrealistic. But yeah, it was a great time. And it was a series where I didn't actually like the first few that much. But by the time you hit book 4, Untamed, that's such a good book. And then Hunted, it slows down a little bit. It's mostly recapped. And then after that, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's after that point where it just seemed like everything was really phenomenal, like 95% of the time. I thought it was super fun. So then at this point we have a turning point. So these were book series that I had started reading, I started reading Harry Potter when I was 10, I read Twilight when I was like 12, 13. I started reading the House of Night series when I was 13. I feel like by the time that I hit 14, we start to see a little bit of a transition just starting into, I don't know, fiction that other people would think is more serious. I'm not saying that, and I know that I might sound crazy if I say that, yeah, House of Night is serious, but like, you can take anything seriously. You know what I'm saying? But I started to get into books that I felt like if people watching this video are gonna be like, ooh, she started to get taste, this might be the point where it starts, maybe. The next book series that I really fell in love with, totally different turn, The Forest of Hands and Teeth by Carrie Ryan. So I feel like nobody talks about these anymore, and it makes me so upset. This is a British edition, by the way. The US cover looked totally different. I got this for like $5 at a bookstore somehow. Anyway, so this one has to do with zombies, and normally I'm not a zombie girl, and I wasn't back then either. However, this was like almost The Village vibes. I don't remember a ton of this. I kind of want to read this. I do remember that the main character's name is Mary, and that she, where is she? I don't remember what organization she's part of. It's called the Sisterhood or something. They call the zombies the unconsecrated. There's a fence breached, and she has to kind of, it says she has to choose between the village and the future. There's so many images from this book that are in my head though of, you know, her caring for the people that she loves, and these absolutely epic sequences between them and the unconsecrated and such. And so the second book follows, it's like farther into the future, and it follows her daughter, and then the third book follows that daughter's sister, so her other daughter. But yeah, definitely the village vibes in this one, and then things kind of change in the other two. Yeah. So yeah, I wish I could remember more of these because I loved them and I was like 14 and I'm 28 now, so sorry. And this was only 3 books, so I don't have as much to go off of compared to like House of Night series, which I explained that poorly too, so I guess it doesn't matter. Somehow I don't have it here with me. I don't know where it is, but The Hunger Games, that trilogy, is just obviously really outstanding. And I think that, you know, with the resurgence, you know, of Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, a lot of us are rediscovering it in our own way. Personally, I have not really bothered to reread. I was not interested in Songbirds and Snakes. I did not want a snow book. Sorry. But yeah, I haven't gone back to it. And this is a difference between me as a teenager versus me now. Like, I just don't want to read about kids dying. And I feel like teenage me needed a lot of the messages that are in there. And needed to look at what's going on in the Hunger Games and see how the world reflected that world, the real world reflected that world. I think I really needed that. I really loved reading Katniss' story. Again, it's a trilogy that I flew through. I know a lot of people had their criticisms of Mockingjay, and I get those now in hindsight, but like, I cried so hard just out of the bittersweetness. I feel like the ending in that one was perfect, and I feel like I remember too as a kid where like I just kind of felt like some people that were reading it just did not freaking get the point, and then I kind of was like kicking myself like, oh, you're being pretentious. But now I see like posts on social media like, did you know that the Hunger Games was a reflection of society? Because look at the war scenes in the Hunger Games and look at footage of war we have now. And I'm like, duh. And then and they do that the same thing with kind of the wealth gap. The capital is obviously far wealthier than Katniss, and we see wealth disparities all over America and the world. Of course, I did really like the love triangle in this one. I feel like, you know, we had Team Gale, Team Peeta, because we were capitalizing off that Twilight energy that we had to pick a side and stuff. But let's be real, this book series was not about a love triangle. It was about a really troubled girl in a troubled time that was caught up in a situation where she was making a difference even though she didn't choose to. And the people that were around her that she chooses to be with are kind of a reflection of her own mentality as well. So those are really good. Next. This is when we hit that point when I was in high school. We had that Sailor Moon resurgence. I was too lazy to get book 1 because it was at the bottom of the stack. So here's book 12, the final like volume. I started to buy all the Sailor Moon manga because I loved the anime growing up, and I wanted to see what the books were like since they were getting retranslated into English. Are these the best quality translations? Probably not. There's definitely some awkwardness in there, but I had a really good time. It's about a girl with magical powers, so it's like one of those magical girl animes, and she and all of her friends have to fight villains. This was a more accessible manga for me to get into because it is only 12 volumes. Some manga series go on literally forever. Not everyone likes Naoko Takeuchi's art style. I think that's how you say her name, but I think it's beautiful. I love how distinctive it is. And so, I mean, just look at how pretty. And of course, this one also has some color pages. I just find, this is another one of the series where like, we start off like, oh, this is okay, but then once I hit like book 4, the second story arc onward, that's where it gets really, really epic. And the way that it kind of comes together, you know, it's a lot to do with caring for others and sacrifice, things like that. The powers are cool. The settings are cool since it's all like this kind of galactic situation in some of the battle scenes. I really want a proper live action Sailor Moon movie. I know a lot of people would disagree with that, but I think it would work really well. So I think out of all of the books on this list, this next one is probably going to be the one that had a strong influence on my writing and the types of stories I like to write. This is Across the Universe by Beth Revis. When I was first exposed to this book existing, it was like a year or two before the publication date, and I was usually not ahead of the curve like that. And I think I found out about it through like the book blogs that I followed at the time. This book is everything. It's a trilogy. The sequels are called A Million Stars and Shades of Earth. The first one, you have two main characters. Well, it's kind of like this for the whole series. You have two main characters that narrate. And so like chapter 1 is by Amy, chapter 2 is by Elder, and you go back and forth between those two. That in itself, for some reason, really struck a chord with me. I loved that style. I loved how the end of each chapter felt slightly incomplete, so you would just keep reading because there was so much going on between the two storylines. So Amy and her family are going to this other planet. They are frozen, and they're supposed to wake up in 50 years, hopefully on the new planet, I think, or no, not 50, 100, 300. I don't know how many years. All I know is that on set of the book, Amy's woken up way too freaking early. Like, her family's asleep. Everyone that she knew that got on the ship was asleep. And Elder's one of the people that were still on the ship. Well, not still on the ship. He was, like, born on the ship. And he's the person that's supposed to eventually be the captain of it. So definitely science fiction. And I already knew that I loved science fiction before then. But this was, like, the first series that I read that was sci-fi. And it's just crazy. Like, beginning to end, every single book, you think that you know what's going on, and then Beth Revis, like, punches you in the face, and, like, you don't know what's going on. And actually, it's not this that's happening, it's this that's happening. And then we have these really beautiful descriptions, you know, along the way of the space travel, and the, you know, eventually you do get to see the planet. I don't think that's a spoiler, considering that the third one is literally called Shades of Earth, so they're going to a planet. Yeah, it was crazy. I loved the reflectiveness that you see common in science fiction. I loved the dual narration, and I thought that just the action-packed nature of it, mixed in with those reflections and those kind of big picture themes, great. You do have a little bit of dystopia because of the way that the spaceship ends up being run as well, so yeah. And honestly, I need to reread it because I think I would eat it up just as fast as an adult. Soon after reading Across the Universe, I think I read these like in the same summer, possibly back to back, the first books in the series, The Lunar Chronicles by Marissa Meyer. I am forever upset that we never got that live action movie version. I feel like post Hunger Games, post like Twilight, this was the book series that had us all by the throats. And I feel like this is the one that would have had the biggest fandom rise up to just spend all of our money at the box office. So yeah, but it didn't happen. So if you don't know, Lunar Chronicles, the first one's Cinder. It's obviously a Cinderella retelling. I was not convinced that I should read these books for a long time because I do not do fairy tale retellings. Every book retells a different one. So we have Cinder, Scarlet, and so she's a new character added to the mix. Then we have Cress, who is Rapunzel, added to the mix, and Winter, who's Snow White. And the thing is, it's all science fiction. So instead of like Cinderella losing her slipper at the ball, she loses her whole foot. Instead of being stuck in a tower, Rapunzel's stuck in a satellite where she's forced to be a hacker for the evil queen. Like, it's crazy. It's also secretly a Sailor Moon retelling. And when I heard that, that's when I was like, I gotta buy these. They're so good. Much like Across the Universe, we're talking like super fast paced while also being reflective. The characters in these are so freaking memorable and just fun to read about. You root for all of them. So that was great as well. There is an element of the fantastic because Cinder lives in the society where cyborgs are looked at as like a lesser class, and she is a cyborg. And the kind of fantastical element is there is a colony of people that live on the moon, and people who live on the moon have this magic, and it's kind of a science-based magic. And that's like a whole thing. And so basically they do end up having to go against this evil queen. And yeah, I love the genre bending nature of this. And once again, I love sci-fi. And so this was like probably the second science fiction series that I really gobbled up. So then I went to college, right? And when I was in college, I read all the freaking time because I majored in English, and I was constantly reading books, poems, short stories. God, so many poems and short stories in hindsight. So I didn't always have time to read, and oftentimes when I did, I was reading more standalones. That's something that is different from me as a kid versus now. When I was a kid, I read lots of series. Like the ones I'm only talking about in this video are like my favorites from that time, but I was reading all kinds of them. I got the Wing series right here still. I read those. I read Hush Hush. I read, the one by Kelly Craig Nevermore. I read that, and I read, what's that one? The Summoning, The Awakening, The Reckoning, whatever they are. I read those. I just read so many freaking series. And now as an adult, for some reason, I don't gravitate towards them as much. And I think it's because of lack of time, because I feel so busy constantly. And so if I'm going to buy like the book of a series, that's time, that's money that I'm going to commit to. I am probably only going to do that if I really, really know for sure that I'm going to love it. And I don't know, I feel like I don't find them as easily. But in college anyway, that's when I picked up Throne of Glass. This is one of my unpopular opinions too. I didn't put it in the video, but a lot of people prefer ACOTAR. I prefer the Throne of Glass books. I think that they're really good. And honestly, the first couple, kind of like with some other series, first couple weren't my faves. I liked them, but it wasn't like, wow, this is my favorite series. For me, it wasn't until we hit Heir of Fire. That was the first book where I was like, I love this. So if you haven't read this yet or have evaded all of the descriptions, it's about Celaena Sardothien, who is a trained assassin who was captured by the king, put into slavery, and then there is a competition for who can be the king's next assassin, and the prince bets on her or whatever, and so she's pulled out of slavery. She has to do this competition, and then we kind of have these kind of magical discoveries. And so as the series continues, I mean, yeah, you have her being a badass like we're promised in the first book. That doesn't change. It does get increasingly more magical, which is how I prefer my fantasy. I don't really prefer just high fantasy and like that medieval setting. This is more of a medieval setting, but like I said, there is a lot of magic and kind of lore and action that isn't just soap opera-y that pulls me in. You do have love interests throughout, and kind of like in the Hunger Games, they're actually really well developed. Like, I do genuinely like all the dudes that she kind of has relationships with. But I mean, the final one's my favorite. So this is definitely, I mean, it's the books I read in college, and that kind of tracks, because when you start off hang out with Celaena, you're like, I think 17 or 18, that's how old she is. That's about how old I was 18. And so when you continue through the series, it's definitely like, even though it's marketed as young adult, I think it definitely has that new adult vibe. So yeah. Definitely gets really big, really epic, lots of different characters, different perspectives. So then, after college, I started diving into some series again, and if my husband watches this video, he's gonna turn it off because he's so tired of hearing me about this. But this is when I discovered Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer, and I love these freaking books so much. I'm rereading this series right now, actually, because I have to prepare for the newest one, Absolution. It comes out in October. I've never been more ready for a book to come out in my life. Honestly, I haven't been this excited for a book release since the last Harry Potter. That's how you know the hype is real, okay? And so if you're not familiar, or if you've just seen the movie's really different from the book. It's still really good. I did like the movie. I saw that first. The book really resonates with me more overall. It's basically written from the perspective of this biologist, and she is in this area, Area X, and we don't know a ton about it. And it's just weird the whole time. Like, the environment's weird. There's this moaning thing at night that comes out, and there's this tunnel thing that she calls a tower, and it breathes, like the tower breathes, and there's this mysterious writing on the wall, and the psychologist that's with them might be crazy. It's so tense. And then the second book kind of follows the organization that's sending these expedition teams into this area. And then the last one kind of gives you multiple perspectives. Well, it was the last one. Now we're getting another one. So yeah, really, really good. And so I think that we're starting to see this trend in the second half of my reading, that I'm starting to gravitate more towards science fiction. Definitely that's what I gravitated toward in my writing. And I do read other things. I feel like when I read standalones, they're not usually sci-fi, but if I'm going to read a series, if I'm going to like devote that time and that money, oftentimes it will be sci-fi, because that's what I'm making on. My most recent new favorite, so this is the last of our list, are the Three Body Problem books by Susan Liu. This is the Three Body Problem, Dark Forest, Death's End. It also has a Netflix show out right now, which is really, really good. It is about, the first one, we have these scientists that are killing themselves, scientific experiments gone horribly wrong. Like, the science isn't sciencing anymore, like nothing is making scientific sense. And the main character is one of the scientists that's been kind of victimized by this, and he has like a countdown in his vision. There's also this mysterious video game that has appeared basically out of nowhere, and it's all gonna mean something. Like, the video game means more than you think it means, and the scientists struggling to science is also going to mean more than you think it means. It ends up having to do, and I don't think this is really a spoiler, it does have to do with aliens. It's great. I love it so much. Very existential. It's very heavy on the science. So unlike the other books in this one, you are gonna get a lot of heavy scientific descriptions. So just be aware of that before you dive in. And be patient because it is really good. They're all long, they're all good. So yeah, this is kind of a cool video actually. Look at me. But this is my reading journey through series. These are my favorite series over time, from the time I was a kid, through my teenage years, through college, when I'm an adult. I think that this is kind of cute. I liked kind of going through these again. I really need to reread more of these. And hopefully, maybe I'll even vlog about them when I do. So I hope that you're all having a wonderful time. Living, laughing, loving, sliving, living, giving. I don't know. I hope you're having a great time. And I will see you next time. Bye.